I wasn't on the bridal party list. I wasn't on the seating chart either, but somehow I was the one holding the entire wedding together. 300 guests, black tie, custom ice sculptures, a string quartet that cost more than my monthly rent, and me standing in the middle of it all with a clipboard, a phone that wouldn't stop buzzing, and a mother who kept reminding me to stay invisible. "Clara, don't hover near the Vance family," my mom whispered, for the third time that morning, adjusting the floral arrangements like she actually paid for them. "They're old money. We don't need—" Enter confusion. Confusion. That's what she called me now. I nodded like I always did. Got it. She didn't even look at me after that, just walked off toward Stella, who was laughing with the wedding planner like she hadn't handed off half her responsibilities to me 2 weeks ago. That was the pattern. Stella got the spotlight. I got the work. I checked my watch. 9:12 a.m. I'd already taken 2 calls from vendors, fixed a last-minute issue with the lighting schedule, and confirmed delivery times for the champagne tower. None of that was technically my job, but if I didn't do it, it wouldn't get done. And if it didn't get done, it would somehow still be my fault. "Clara," my dad called from across the room, "make sure you don't mention where you work if anyone asks. Just say you freelance or something." I looked at him. "Why?" He lowered his voice like we were discussing something illegal, because the Vances are very particular. They expect a certain image. Right. Because owning a company apparently didn't fit their version of respectable. "Sure," I said. "Wouldn't want to embarrass anyone." He didn't catch the tone. He never did. I stepped outside for a second just to breathe. My phone buzzed again, another email from the catering team confirming final numbers. I skimmed it quickly, mentally checking off what was done and what still needed attention. Then I went back inside and got to work. That was my life for the past 6 months. 60-hour weeks running my small firm, which no one in my family took seriously, while also managing everything Stella didn't feel like dealing with. She told people she was an architectural consultant, high-end projects, luxury developments, the kind of work that impressed people like the Vances. Meanwhile, I was still figuring things out, even though I was the one actually building things. Even though the money keeping my parents afloat for the last 4 years came from me. But that part never made it into their version of the story. Around noon, I was in the middle of confirming table layouts when my mom pulled me aside again. "Can you run back to the apartment and grab Stella's backup heels?" she asked. "You mean the ones she decided she didn't like yesterday?" "Yes, those, just in case." I stared at her. "I'm coordinating 3 vendors right now. And I'm dealing with guests," she shot back. "We all have responsibilities, Clara." "Right. Mine just didn't count." "Fine," I said already, reaching for my keys. On the drive over, I let myself feel it for a second. The irritation, the exhaustion, the quiet, constant pressure of being treated like I was one bad decision away from ruining everything. Then I shut it down. Because getting emotional never helped. It just gave them more to use against me. I grabbed the shoes, drove back, handed them off without a thank you, and went right back to work. By late afternoon, everything looked perfect. The venue was set. The flowers were flawless. The schedule was tight but manageable. From the outside, it was exactly the kind of wedding people talked about for years. Inside, I was running on caffeine and habit. My phone rang just as I was double-checking the catering timeline. Unknown number. I answered anyway. "This is Clara." "Hi, this is Daniel from Laurent Catering. We need to speak immediately." His tone made my stomach drop. "Okay, what's going on?" "There's been an issue with the deposit." "What kind of issue?" A pause. Papers shuffling. "The $42,000 initial payment we received last week, it was reversed this morning." I blinked. "Reversed?" "Yes. The bank flagged it and pulled the funds. We currently have no valid deposit on file." "That doesn't make sense," I said already, pulling up the contract in my email. "My father handled the payments." "According to our records, the contract isn't under your father's name." I frowned. "Then whose name is it under?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Clara Hayes." Everything went quiet. "That's not possible," I said slowly. "I didn't sign that contract." "Your signature is on the documents we received," Daniel replied, "along with your personal information, social security number included." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "Send me a copy," I said. "It's already in your inbox." I hung up and opened the email. There it was. My name, my address, my information, and my signature, except it wasn't mine. Not really. It was close enough to pass, close enough that most people wouldn't question it. But I knew my own handwriting. This was a copy, a careful one, practiced, forged. I scrolled through the rest of the contract. $120, 000 total. Payment schedule, liability clauses, all tied to me. Not my parents, not Stella, me. I sat there in the middle of the venue, surrounded by flowers and polished glass and people who had no idea what was happening and tried to process it. They didn't just mess up a payment. They used me, my name, my credit, my identity, to secure a wedding they couldn't afford. Because Stella couldn't. Because her perfect life came with a credit score that couldn't pass a basic check. And instead of fixing it, they decided I'd take the risk. Without asking, without telling me. I looked up and saw my parents across the room smiling, talking to one of Julian's relatives like everything was under control. Like this was all normal. For a second, I imagined walking over there, holding up the contract, calling them out in front of everyone. I imagined the silence, the looks, the fallout. Then I imagined what would happen after. They wouldn't apologize. They'd rewrite it, twist it, make it my fault somehow. They always did. So I didn't move. I closed the email, locked my phone, and took a slow breath. Because this wasn't just about a forged signature. This was a pattern, a system. And if they were willing to go this far, it meant there was more, a lot more. I turned back to the schedule, picked up my pen, and kept working. But this time I wasn't just managing a wedding. I was starting to look for everything they thought I'd never question. I kept my face neutral, finished the call with the florist, and slipped out to my car like I was just grabbing something I forgot. The second the door shut, I opened my laptop. Not my phone. Not quick checks. I needed real answers. First, stop my credit reports. I hadn't pulled them in months. I didn't expect surprises. I pay everything early, keep things clean, avoid unnecessary risk. It's not exciting, but it works. Except this time it didn't. There it was. A new line of liability tied to a vendor account I never opened. The catering contract wasn't just a one-off mistake. It was part of something bigger. Multiple soft checks, one hard inquiry from a financial group I didn't recognize, and a business credit extension request linked to my name, but not my company. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the screen. They didn't just forge one signature. They built an entire financial layer under my identity. Quietly, repeatedly, like it was routine. I exhaled slowly and closed that tab. Then I opened a different set of files. Stella's career. I'd never paid much attention to it before. Not because I didn't care, but because every time she talked about work, it sounded vague enough to avoid real questions and polished enough to impress people who didn't know better. Luxury resort consulting, private development partnerships, confidential projects. That last one should have been a red flag, because real confidential projects don't get name-dropped at brunch. I logged into my company's internal system. Secure server, restricted access, the kind of place where you don't accidentally find things. I searched one term, Horizon. The Horizon project was my biggest deal. Multi-phase boutique resort development, quiet investors, high privacy requirements. The kind of project that if handled right could set me up for the next 10 years. Only a handful of people even knew it existed. And none of them were named Stella. I opened the access logs. My account, my assistant, legal team, and then an external access point, unauthorized. Not recent either. It had been happening for months. Small pulls at first, documents, renderings, financial projections, then full presentations, exported, packaged. I felt my jaw tighten. Someone hadn't just peeked, they'd built something out of it. I switched screens and did something I should have done a long time ago. I searched Stella's name alongside Harrison Vance. It didn't take long. There were photos, event recaps, industry write-ups. And then I found it. A private development showcase. Invitation only. The kind of room you don't get into unless someone powerful opens the door. Stella was in the photos, standing next to Harrison, smiling like she belonged there. I clicked on the attached presentation summary. Lead architectural consultant presenting the Horizon concept. I didn't blink, didn't react, just read it again. Then again. She didn't just lie about having a career. She walked into a room full of investors and presented my project as hers. My numbers, my layouts, my work, rebranded under her name, to secure her place in that family, to look like she was worth marrying. I closed the laptop and sat there for a second, not shocked, not even angry yet, just clear. Everything finally made sense. The way my parents kept pushing me to stay out of sight, the way Stella suddenly had access to rooms she didn't belong in, the way money kept magically showing up when they needed it. They weren't supporting her. They were using me to build her. I grabbed the printed catering contract from my bag, along with a folder I hadn't realized I'd been building for years. Emails, payment records, transfers I'd made to my parents that they conveniently forgot about. Then I got out of the car. The house looked the same as always. Quiet, polished, comfortable in a way that suggested stability even when it wasn't real. I walked straight to my dad's office and didn't knock. He looked up from his desk, annoyed at first. Then he saw my face. "What is it?" he asked. I closed the door behind me and locked it. That got his attention. I set the contract down in front of him. "Explain this." He glanced at it like it was just another piece of paper. "Clara, I'm a little busy." "Explain it." He sighed, leaned back in his chair, and finally looked at the document. I watched the exact moment he realized which one it was. His expression didn't panic. It adjusted. That was worse. "It's just paperwork," he said. "You're overreacting." "Is that my signature?" He didn't answer. "Is that my social security number?" Still nothing. I slid my laptop across the desk and opened the Horizon files. "Is this also just paperwork?" He looked at the screen. This time there was a pause. Not confusion. Recognition. "You went digging," he said. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" He tapped his fingers against the desk, thinking, calculating. And then something shifted. The concern disappeared. Completely. "You need to calm down," he said. I almost laughed. Calm down. Yes. Because what you're about to do could ruin your sister's life. There it was. Not denial. Not apology. Just priority. Stella. Temend, 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 Temend. "They forged a contract in my name," I said. "She stole my work and presented it as her own." And he replied. I stared at him. "And she's getting married into a family that can change everything for us," he said, like he was explaining something obvious. "Do you understand what that means?" "I understand that you committed fraud." He leaned forward. "Lower your voice." "No." Something in his eyes hardened. "Then listen carefully," he said. "You're going to let this go." I didn't move. "No, I'm not." "Yes, you are." He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. Thicker than mine. Older. He set it on the desk and slid it toward me. "Do you remember the inventory discrepancy from my store 5 years ago?" I frowned. "That was an accounting error." "That's one version of the story." A cold feeling crept up my spine. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," he continued calmly, "that I have enough documentation to file a report claiming you embezzled funds from my business." "That's not true." "It doesn't have to be." The room went very still. "If I submit it," he said, "you'll spend years trying to clear your name. Your licenses will be frozen. Your company will be audited. Every client you have will walk away before you get the chance to explain." I didn't speak. "You think the Vances will care about your side of the story," he added. "Or will they just see a financial investigation and cut you out completely?" He let that sit for a second, then finished it. "You take the hit, Clara. You stay quiet, and in return your sister secures a future that benefits all of us." All of us. I felt something settle in my chest. Not panic. Not fear. Understanding. "You're asking me to take responsibility for fraud," I said. "I'm telling you to support your family by destroying my own life. Don't be dramatic." I looked at him, really looked this time. And whatever version of him I used to respect wasn't there anymore. "You already decided I was expendable," I said. That's not what this is. It is. He stood up impatient now. We're done here. Go back to the venue, act normal, and don't make this worse than it already is. He walked past me and unlocked the door. Just like that. Conversation over. Threat delivered. Decision made. I didn't follow him. I stayed in that office, staring at the documents on the desk, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway. This wasn't about a wedding anymore. This wasn't even about Stella. This was survival. And if they were willing to go this far, it meant one thing. They thought I wouldn't fight back. I picked up my phone, scrolled to a number I hadn't needed in a while, and hit call. When she answered, I didn't waste time. I need you to prepare filings, I said. Everything. Corporate, legal, and personal. A pause on the other end. Then calm and ready. Tell me what happened. I looked at the papers one more time. They just made a very expensive mistake. I ended the call, slipped my phone back into my bag, and showed up to the rehearsal dinner like nothing had changed. The country club was exactly what you'd expect. Polished floors, soft lighting staff who moved like they were trained not to make a sound. The kind of place where people don't ask what something costs because they already know they can afford it. I checked in at the entrance, gave my name, and watched the hostess scan the list. There was a slight pause, then a polite smile. We have you seated at table 12. Of course I was. Not with the family. Not with the bridal party. Table 12 was in the back corner near the kitchen doors, close enough to hear everything, far enough to not matter. I walked over, sat down, and placed my napkin on my lap like I belonged there. From where I was sitting, I had a perfect view of the head table. Stella was glowing, designer dress, perfect hair, the kind of smile that looked effortless until you realized how much practice it took. Julian stood next to her, relaxed, confident, already fitting into the role he'd been raised for. And then there was Harrison Vance. He didn't need to speak to control the room. People adjusted around him without being told. Conversations shifted when he walked by. Even my parents, who usually acted like they were in charge of everything, were suddenly very careful with their tone. I watched my father shake his hand like they were equals. It was a good performance. If you didn't know better, you'd think we were exactly the kind of family they wanted to align with. Successful, stable, impressive, not built on borrowed credit and someone else's work. A server placed a glass of wine in front of me. I nodded, didn't drink it. I preferred to stay clear. Because tonight wasn't about reacting, it was about watching. Dinner started. Light conversation, polite laughter, the usual exchange of stories designed to make everyone look just a little better than they actually were. And my parents played their roles perfectly. My mother leaned into every conversation like she belonged there, talking about Stella's projects, her clients, her vision. My father filled in the gaps, adding numbers, timelines, making it all sound structured and real. No hesitation. No cracks. Just a clean, practiced version of a life that didn't exist. I sat there listening to them describe a reality I built and handed to someone else. And no one questioned it. Why would they? It sounded good. That's usually enough. Halfway through the main course, someone tapped a glass. My mother stood up. Of course she did. She smoothed out her dress, took a breath, and smiled like she was about to deliver something meaningful. I just want to say a few words, she began, her voice soft and emotional. The room quieted instantly. This has been such a journey for our family. I already knew where this was going. And Stella, she looked over at her like she was seeing her for the first time. You've been our rock. I didn't move. You stepped up when things were difficult. When your father and I were going through hard times, you were the one who carried us. A few people nodded, sympathetic, supportive. Completely unaware. You didn't just build a career, she continued, her voice shaking just enough to feel real. You built a life that lifted all of us. You paid off our mortgage. You gave us stability when we needed it most. There it was. I felt the words land, one by one. Mortgage, stability, support. All credited to Stella. All funded by me. 4 years of transfers, quiet deposits. No recognition, no discussion, just an understanding that family helps family. Except in this version of the story, I didn't exist. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip, and kept my face neutral. The room broke into applause. Stella smiled emotional, playing her part perfectly. My father put a hand on her shoulder, proud. like they hadn't just erased me in front of a room full of people. I set the glass down carefully. No reaction. That's what they expected from me. And that's exactly what they got. Dinner continued like nothing happened. Because for everyone else, nothing had. A few minutes later, I noticed movement near the head table. Harrison Vance stood up. He spoke briefly to Julian, then started walking across the room. Not toward the exit, toward me. Interesting. Conversations shifted as he passed. People straightened slightly. Watched. I stayed seated. Let him come to me. He stopped at the edge of my table. "You're Clara Wright?" he asked. His tone wasn't rude, just direct. "Yes," I said. "I've heard your name a few times tonight." "I bet you have." "Have you?" I replied. Before he could say anything else, my mother appeared out of nowhere. Perfect timing. "Oh, Harrison," she said warmly, stepping between us just enough to redirect the moment. "I didn't realize you'd made your way over here." He glanced at her, then back at me. "We were just talking." "Yes, of course," she said quickly. "Clara tends to keep to herself." That was one way to put it. "She's our—" She paused, searching for the right word, then found it. "Our little challenge." I didn't react. "Our difficult project," she added, with a soft laugh like it was a harmless joke. "She's still figuring things out. Career direction. You know how that can be." Harrison's expression didn't change, but I saw it. The shift. From curiosity to assessment. "She's had a hard time keeping a steady job," my mother continued. "But Stella has been incredibly generous. She's been supporting Clara, making sure she's okay." There it was. Clean, simple, completely false, and delivered like it was fact. I could feel people at nearby tables listening, not staring directly, just enough to catch the tone, to build a quiet narrative in their heads. I stood up, slow, controlled. "Nice to meet you," I said to Harrison. He looked at me for a second, longer than necessary, like he was trying to decide which version of me to believe. Then he gave a small nod. "You too." But the look was different now. Not respectful, not curious. Pity. That was new. I held it for exactly 1 second. Then I let it go. Because correcting it here wouldn't fix anything. It would just make a scene. And right now, I wasn't interested in scenes. I was interested in timing. "I'm going to step out for a minute," I said, more to myself than anyone else. No one stopped me. Why would they? I walked through the hallway, past the main dining area into the restroom, closed the door behind me. Finally, quiet. I stepped up to the mirror and looked at myself. Same face. Same expression. Nothing dramatic. No tears. No breakdown. Just clarity. They didn't just lie. They replaced me in every version of their story that mattered. And tonight was proof they were comfortable doing it in public. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and unlocked it. One message. That's all it took. I typed it slowly. No hesitation. No second guessing. "Execute the filings. Tomorrow we burn it down." I hit send. Watched the message go through. Then I locked the screen, set the phone down for a second, and took a breath. Not deep. Just enough. Because from this point on, everything was already in motion. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting to their story. I was about to end it. I slipped my phone back into my bag, straightened my posture, and walked out of the restroom like I had somewhere important to be. By the time I got home that night, everything was already in motion. I didn't sleep much. Not because I was stressed, because I was busy. Emails, calls, documents, authorizations. By 7:30 a.m., my legal team had everything they needed. By 8:00 a.m., the company name attached to every version of the Horizon project, the one Stella had been proudly presenting, no longer existed in the form she thought it did. Clean, legal, final. I shut my laptop, got dressed, and headed to the venue. The wedding morning was exactly what you'd expect. Quiet chaos. Hairstylists moving fast, makeup artists setting up lights, bridesmaids running around in matching robes like this was a movie, and me. I was in the corner with a steamer working through dresses that cost more than most people's monthly salary. No one asked me to sit. No one asked if I needed anything. That part was consistent. "Clara, be careful with that," my mother said as she walked by, barely glancing at me. That fabric wrinkles easily." "I know," I replied. Of course I knew. I'd read every vendor sheet, every material detail, every handling note, because someone had to. The room smelled like expensive perfume and stress. Stella sat in front of the mirror, surrounded by people, laughing like nothing in her life had ever been complicated. She caught my reflection for half a second, then looked away. No acknowledgement. That was new. Or maybe just more honest. I finished the last dress, hung it carefully, and stepped back. Everything looked perfect. Exactly how they wanted it. Exactly how they needed it to look. 30 minutes before the ceremony, I felt it shift. Not loud. Not obvious. Just different. My mother's tone got sharper. My father stopped smiling. Stella's energy tightened like she was waiting for something. Then my father walked over. "Clara," he said, "we need you for a second." I didn't ask why. I already knew this wasn't about anything small. I followed them into the bridal suite. My mother closed the door behind me, then locked it. That was the first real confirmation. This wasn't a conversation. It was a setup. I turned around slowly. "All three of you?" I asked. My father didn't answer. He walked to the table, picked up a folder, and set it down in front of me. Neat, organized, prepared. "Read this," he said. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "A formality," my mother said quickly. "Just something to keep everything clean." Clean. I opened the folder. Non-disclosure agreement. Copyright transfer. I flipped through the pages once, then again slower. Every line was clear. Every clause was intentional. They weren't asking me to stay quiet. They were asking me to disappear. Legally. Completely. "You want me to sign over the Horizon project," I said. Stella finally spoke. "It's just paperwork, Clara." I looked up at her. "Is it?" She crossed her arms, already defensive. "You're not even using it the way it deserves to be used," she said. "I can actually take it somewhere, expand it, build something bigger. With my work, with our family's opportunity," she corrected. There it was again, rewriting ownership like it was a matter of perspective. My father stepped closer. "This is a wedding gift," he said. I almost smiled. "A wedding gift." "Yes," he said firmly. "You sign this and we move forward. No issues, no complications. And if I don't," that's when he moved. Not aggressive, just enough to block the door. "You're not going to cause a scene today," he said. "Not here, not in front of these people. I'm not the one causing anything. You will be if you refuse." My mother stepped in softer tone, same message. "Clara, think about what's at stake," she said. "This is Stella's future. Our future." "No," I said quietly. "This is yours." Stella let out a breath, clearly losing patience. "Why are you making this difficult?" she snapped. "You've never even cared about attention or recognition. You like staying in the background. So what's the problem?" I looked at her. Really looked. "You think this is about attention." She didn't answer, because she didn't understand the question. My father tapped the papers. "Sign it." I didn't move. "Clara," he said again, slower this time. "If you walk out of this room without signing, I will call security." I held his gaze. "And tell them what?" "That you're unstable," he replied. "That you've been causing issues all morning. That you're not authorized to be here." "That won't hold. It will long enough." Silence. Then he added the part he wanted me to hear clearly. "They'll escort you out through the front. In front of everyone. 300 guests. The Vance family. Investors. Clients. People who only needed a reason. And once that happens," he continued, "whatever credibility you think you have left disappears." There it was. Not just control. Public damage. Permanent. I let that sit for a second. Then I looked around the room. My mother, focused on the outcome. My father, focused on control. In question. Stella, focused on herself. No hesitation. No guilt. No question. Just expectation. For the first time, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even angry. I was clear. This wasn't my family anymore. It was a system, and I was the part they thought they could replace. I reached for the pen. My mother relaxed slightly. Stella exhaled. My father stepped back from the door. I flipped to the signature page. Didn't rush. Didn't hesitate. Signed it. Clean, steady, exact. Then I closed the folder and handed it back. "There," I said. My father took it, checked the page, and nodded. "Good," he said. Stella smiled, relieved, victorious, like she just secured something permanent. None of them noticed the part that mattered. I picked up my bag, adjusted the strap on my shoulder, and walked to the door. This time, no one stopped me. Why would they? They got what they wanted. Or at least, what they thought they wanted. I stepped out into the hallway, the noise of the wedding starting to build again, everything moving toward the ceremony like nothing had changed. But something had, because as the ink dried on that contract, there was one detail they didn't know. At exactly 8:00 a.m., that morning the entity listed on those documents, the one Stella thought she now owned, didn't exist anymore. And I was the only one in the building who knew it. I adjusted my seat, smoothed out the fabric of my dress, and let the ceremony happen like I was watching something on mute. It was flawless. Of course it was. Perfect vows. Perfect timing. Perfect reactions. Even the lighting hit exactly when it needed to. People cried at the right moments, laughed at the right lines, applauded like they were part of something meaningful. From the outside, it looked like a family coming together. From where I was sitting, it looked like a transaction closing. By the time we moved into the reception hall, the scale of it was impossible to ignore. Ice sculptures lined the entrance, champagne towers stacked high enough to make a statement, live music soft and controlled, like even the sound had a dress code, $250,000 worth of atmosphere, funded by lies, borrowed status, and my name quietly attached where it shouldn't be. I found my seat without asking. Back of the room. Again. Different table, same message. I sat down, placed my purse beside me, and took in the view. From here, everything was visible. My parents moving from table to table, shaking hands, smiling like they belonged in this world. Stella at the center of it all, glowing under attention she didn't earn, but knew how to hold. Julian playing his part well, supportive, proud, completely unaware of what he had actually married into. And Harrison Vance, watching everything, not distracted, not relaxed, just observing. Good. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Dinner service started. Plates came and went, conversations layered over each other, laughter glasses clinking the steady rhythm of a night designed to impress. No one spoke to me. No one needed to. I wasn't part of the picture they were presenting. I was just there. And for once, I didn't mind, because this time, being overlooked worked in my favor. Halfway through the meal, the lights shifted slightly. Subtle. Controlled. Acque. My father stood up. Of course he did. He adjusted his jacket, took a moment like he was collecting something important, and walked toward the stage. Confident. Relaxed. Exactly the version of himself he wanted everyone to believe in. He took the microphone, tapped it once, and smiled. "Good evening, everyone." The room quieted instantly. He knew how to do this. "I want to start by saying how proud I am tonight." He glanced at Stella, let the pause sit just long enough. "Proud of my daughter." Applause. Easy. She's always been exceptional, focused, driven. The kind of person who doesn't just dream about success, she builds it. I didn't move. "She didn't get here by accident," he continued. "Her work, her vision, her discipline, it's what brought her into a room like this, into a family like this." A few heads turned toward the Vance table. Harrison didn't react. He just listened. "And that's what makes this moment so special," my father said. "Because Stella didn't just create a life for herself." He paused again. "She lifted all of us with her." There it was. The version of the story they'd been practicing, polished, clean, completely false. "She supported her mother and me when times were difficult," he added. "She gave us stability when we needed it most." Applause again. Louder this time, because people love that story. The successful daughter who takes care of her parents. It sounds right. It feels right, even when it isn't. I kept my expression neutral. No reaction. No correction. Not yet. And beyond all of that, he continued, voice warming. "She's kind, generous, patient, passionate." That one almost got a reaction out of me, especially when it comes to family. I saw it before he said it. The shift. The decision. He was enjoying this. Too much. And we love her even more, he went on, for the way she's always carried the weight of her sister. There it was. Subtle at first, then not. A few people glanced around trying to follow the direction of the comment. My father didn't rush it. He let it build. Then he looked straight at me. From across the room, locked in. "And Clara," he said into the microphone, his tone almost soft, "you've always been the family shame." The room went silent. Not gradual. Instant. 300 people, mid-conversation, mid-bite, mid-thought, stopped. Completely. "But Stella never gave up on you," he continued like he was doing me a favor. "Even when you made things difficult, even when you couldn't find your place, no one moved. Even tonight," he added, a small smile forming when you showed up just to ask for handouts. "She still welcomed you." There it was. Clear. Direct. Public. I could feel it. Not emotion. Attention. Every head in the room turning. Every eye landing in the same place. Me. I didn't look down. Didn't shift in my seat. I just sat there. Let them see whatever version of me they wanted. Confusion. Judgment. Curiosity. Pity. That one again. Interesting how consistent that was. Across the room, Stella looked frozen. Not shocked. Not exactly. More like uncertain. Like she didn't know if this was part of the script or not. My mother sat perfectly still. No interruption. No correction. Of course not. This was useful. My father stood on that stage completely in control. Or at least he thought he was. The silence stretched. Heavy. Waiting. Because they all knew what usually happened next. I'd get up. Leave. Disappear. Just like I always had. Quiet. Contained. Convenient. That's what they were expecting. That's what made this moment safe for them. I reached for my purse. Slow. Deliberate. A few people leaned slightly like they didn't want to miss it. I pushed my chair back. The sound cut through the silence more than anything he'd said. I stood up. No rush. No hesitation. And then I started walking. Not toward the exit. Toward the stage. Through the middle of the room, past table after table of people who didn't move out of my way fast enough. Heels against polished floor. Steady. Measured. Every step intentional. I didn't look at anyone. Didn't acknowledge the whispers starting to build. Didn't break pace. Because this wasn't a reaction. This was a decision. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving the story they wrote for me. I was walking straight into it. I kept walking. The sound of my heels carried farther than it should have, sharp against the floor, steady enough that people started shifting before I even reached their tables. No one spoke. No one stopped me. At the edge of the room, I saw my father move. Subtle at first. A quick glance to the side. A small gesture toward security near the entrance. He was trying to get ahead of it, control the situation before it changed. But he wasn't the only one paying attention. Harrison Vance lifted his hand. Just slightly. That was all it took. Security stopped moving. That told me everything I needed to know. I reached the stage, stepped up without hesitation, and stopped directly in front of my father. Up close, he looked different. Not confident. Not in control. Just stuck. For the first time all night, he didn't know what to do. "Clara," he said under his breath, tight smile still fixed for the room, "don't do this." I didn't answer. I reached out, took the microphone from his hand, and turned toward the room. No rush. No shaking. Just quiet. Real quiet. I didn't look at my parents. Didn't look at Stella. I looked straight at Harrison. Because he was the only one in the room who would actually understand what I was about to say. "Mr. Vance," I said. My voice carried clean. No strain. No emotion. Just clear. "I think you're about to make a very expensive mistake." A ripple moved through the room. Not loud. Just enough. Harrison didn't interrupt. "Good. Let's start with something simple," I continued. "Stella is not an architect." Silence. Not disbelief. Not yet. Just confusion. "She's never been licensed," I added. "She's never led a project. She's never been hired in the capacity she's been presenting." I let that sit for a second. Then I moved to the part that mattered. The Horizon project she's been showing you. I paused. "That's mine." I saw it. Not from everyone, But from him, the shift, recognition, interest. Not conceptually, I said. Not collaboratively, legally. I reached into my purse, pulled out a stack of documents. Thick, organized, prepared. I walked over to the head table and set them down. Hard. The sound cut through the room. Clean. Final. These are notarized filings, I said. Ownership records, patent documentation, corporate registrations tied to my holding company. No one moved. They outline the full structure of the Horizon development, from acquisition to execution, every phase. I looked back at Harrison. Every detail she presented to you came from this. I tapped the stack lightly. Not aggressive, just precise. She didn't build it, I said. She accessed it. I let that land. Then I kept going. Now let's talk about tonight. I pulled a second set of papers from my bag. Thinner, but sharper. The catering contract for this wedding, $120,000, is not under my father's name. I turned slightly just enough for the room to follow. It's under mine. A few people shifted. Finally. They used my personal information, I continued. My credit, my identity. Without authorization. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. The $42,000 deposit that was supposed to secure tonight's event, I added. It bounced this morning. That got attention. Because now it wasn't abstract. It was immediate. It bounced because the account it was tied to flagged the transaction, I said. Because it wasn't legitimate. I placed those documents on top of the first stack. Aligned. Controlled. And just to complete the picture, I said, reaching into my bag one last time, these are 4 years of mortgage payments. I held them up for a second. Then set them down. Made by me, I said. Transferred directly to my parents' account. I glanced at my mother. Brief. That same mortgage my mother just credited to Stella 15 minutes ago. No reaction from her. Not outward. But I saw it. The calculation. Too late. And finally I said, picking up the last document, this. I held up the NDA. Fresh ink. Still clean. This was presented to me 30 minutes before the ceremony. I looked at my father, then back at Harrison. They asked me to sign over full rights to the Horizon project as a wedding gift. A pause. Then I finished it. I signed it. A few heads tilted. Confused. That part is true, I said. Then I lowered the paper. But the entity listed on this contract, I added, it doesn't exist anymore. Now the room shifted. Not just curiosity. Concern. I dissolved and restructured my company at 8 o'clock this morning, I said. Every asset, every right, every piece of intellectual property tied to Horizon was moved before this document was signed. I placed the NDA on the stack, neatly. So what they're holding, I said, is worthless. Silence. Heavy. Complete. No music. No movement. Just 300 people processing something they weren't supposed to see. I stepped back slightly from the table. Gave space. Because this wasn't about convincing anyone. It was about showing them, and the proof was already sitting in front of them. Real, documented, verifiable. I looked at Harrison one more time. You don't have to take my word for any of this, I said. It's all right there. He didn't respond immediately. He reached forward instead, picked up the top document, adjusted his glasses, and started reading. Behind me, I heard movement. Fast. Uncontrolled. My mother. No, this is ridiculous, she snapped, rushing toward me. She's confused. She's been under a lot of stress. She reached for the microphone. Too late. The room had already shifted, because the evidence wasn't in my voice anymore. It was in his hands. I didn't say another word. I just stepped back and let him read. Harrison adjusted his glasses slowly, like he wasn't interested in drama, only facts. He flipped through the first set of documents, then the second, then went back to the first again. Careful. Methodical. The kind of reading that doesn't miss details. The room stayed completely silent. No one dared to interrupt him. Not my father. Not my mother. Not even Stella. Because everyone understood something at the same time. This wasn't about opinions anymore. This was verification. I watched his eyes move across the pages. The bank statements, the signatures, the timestamps, the corporate filings. He wasn't skimming. He was checking, cross-referencing in real time. And the longer it took, the worse it got. For them, not for me. Finally, he closed the folder. Not slammed, just closed. Then he looked up. Not at me, at Stella. You presented this work as your own, he said. No anger in his voice, which somehow made it worse. Stella froze. For a second, it looked like she might actually try to deny it. Then she looked at my parents. That was the tell. Julian turned toward her confusion, already turning into something sharper. Stella, he said, his voice low but tight. What is he talking about? She didn't answer immediately, because there wasn't a clean answer. She started, then stopped. Julian stepped closer. Is that project yours? Another pause. Longer, more visible. Answer me, he said. And just like that, the control she'd been holding all night cracked. I didn't have a choice, she said quickly, her voice rising. You don't understand how much pressure there was. That's not what I asked. I was trying to make this work, she continued, now looking at him like she was the one being cornered. For us, for the family. For what family, he snapped. She gestured vaguely toward my parents, toward the room, toward everything. All of this, she said, this doesn't happen without positioning, without strategy. You think people just walk into opportunities like this? Julian stared at her. You lied. It wasn't a lie, she shot back. It was presentation. Even I almost laughed at that. Presentation, he repeated. She had the work, Stella said, pointing at me now like I was a resource instead of a person. I just used it differently. You stole it. I adapted it. That's not better. It's how this works, she snapped. Everyone does it. You leverage what you have, you build on it. By taking someone else's identity, he cut in. That landed. Hard. She faltered. Just for a second. Then she shifted again. It wasn't just me, she said quickly. They told me to do it. And there it was. The pivot. She turned on them. My mother stepped forward immediately. That's not true, she said sharply. We never told you to lie. You said it was necessary, Stella fired back. You said this was our chance. My father finally spoke. Lower your voice. No, Stella snapped. You told me this was the only way I'd be taken seriously. We gave you support, he said. What you did with it is your responsibility. Oh, now it's my responsibility, she said, almost laughing. After everything you pushed me to do, the room didn't move. 300 people, completely still, watching a family fall apart in real time. Julian stepped back, not dramatically, just enough, like he needed distance to process what he was seeing. You knew about this, he asked, looking at my parents. Neither of them answered. That was enough. He looked back at Stella. You built this entire relationship on something that isn't real. Her eyes filled instantly. Tears. Right on cue. I was trying to be enough, she said, voice breaking. For you, for your family. You could have just been honest. That's easy for you to say, she shot back. You were born into this. I had to earn it. Not like this. I did what I had to do. And just like that, the room wasn't watching a perfect wedding anymore. They were watching damage control fail. Completely. Harrison stood up. Slow. Deliberate. And the second he did, everything else stopped. Not because he raised his voice. Because he didn't have to. Arthur, he said. My father turned toward him. For the first time all night, he looked uncertain. Yes, Harrison. Don't. One word. Flat. That was all it took. Harrison stepped away from the table, holding the documents in one hand. I don't tolerate fraud, he said. No emphasis. No theatrics. Just fact. And I don't build partnerships on deception. My father tried to recover. This is a misunderstanding, he said quickly. There's context here. There is, Harrison agreed. He lifted the document slightly. And it's all documented. Silence. Cold. Final. The financial backing we discussed for your business, he continued, is no longer on the table. That hit. Not just emotionally, structurally. Because that was the real deal behind all of this. Not the wedding. Not the relationship. The merger. The bailout. Gone. Effective immediately. You're making a mistake, my father said, stepping forward. No, Harrison replied. I'm correcting one. He turned slightly. Table 4, he said. 2 people stood up immediately. Lawyers. Of course they were. Begin drafting documentation for fraud review, he instructed. Include the forged contracts and any associated financial misrepresentation tied to this event. My mother stepped in front of him. You can't do that, she said, panic finally breaking through. This is a private matter. It stopped being private when it became criminal. She froze. Because there was no response to that. Around us, the room had changed. Completely. The music had stopped. The staff wasn't moving. Guests were no longer pretending to look away. They were watching, openly now, because the illusion was gone. What was left didn't need interpretation. It was clear, messy, real. I stepped back from the table. No rush, no hesitation, just distance. For the first time in my life, there was nothing holding me there. No expectation, no obligation, no role to play. Everything they built collapsed on its own. And I didn't have to carry it anymore. I didn't move right away. I just stood there a few steps back from the table and watched it fall apart. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic collapse, just small, quiet exits. One couple stood up, then another. Chairs shifted. Napkins dropped onto plates that hadn't been touched. Conversations started in low voices, then stopped halfway through. People weren't leaving loudly. They were leaving carefully, like they didn't want to be associated with what was happening. Within minutes, the room that was designed to impress 300 people started to feel empty. The champagne towers were still standing. The lights were still perfect. The band hadn't moved. But none of it mattered anymore. Because the only thing holding it together, the story was gone. I glanced toward the head table. Julian was still standing there, but not for long. He looked at Stella one more time. No anger this time. No argument. Just distance. Then he turned and walked away. Didn't announce it. Didn't explain it. Just left. Stella didn't follow him. She stayed in her chair, hands shaking makeup, starting to break the version of her that had been so carefully built, slipping piece by piece. She started crying. Not quietly. Not controlled. The kind of crying that comes when there's nothing left to hold on to. No one went to comfort her. Not my mother. Not my father. Because they had something else to deal with, they turned to me. Of course they did, because now I was useful again. Clara, my mother said, already moving toward me, her voice softer than it had been all day. We need to fix this. I didn't respond. This got out of hand, she continued quickly. You know how these things can spiral, people misunderstand. No, I said. She stopped. This isn't a misunderstanding. My father stepped in, trying a different angle. You've made your point, he said. There's no need to take this further. I looked at him. You took it further, I replied. I just showed it. His jaw tightened. We can still control the outcome, he said. Talk to Harrison. Clarify the situation. Clarify. That was a new one. You want me to lie for you, I said. We want you to help your family, my mother corrected. I almost smiled. Because even now, even after everything, they were still using the same language. Just adjusted for the situation. He's going to pull everything, my father added. The funding, the partnership, everything we've been building. You mean everything you've been planning. He didn't argue that, because he couldn't. Clara, my mother said, stepping closer, lowering her voice like this, was something private. You have resources. You have connections. You can fix this. There it was. Not concern. Not regret. Need. You can talk to him, she continued. Explain that it was a mistake, that things got misrepresented. You can smooth it over. I looked at her. Really looked. This woman had spent years reminding me to stay out of sight. And now she wanted me to step in. To save them. Using the same things they told me didn't matter. You want me to use my work, I said slowly, to fix the damage you caused with it. Yes, she said without hesitation. At least she was honest about that part. My father exhaled, trying to stay composed. This doesn't have to end like this, he said. We can still recover. No. They couldn't. They just didn't realize it yet. I reached into my bag. Both of them watched the movement closely. Hope. That was new too. I pulled out a single document. Folded once. Clean. Prepared. I held it for a second, then handed it to my father. He took it immediately. Of course he did. Like it might be the solution he'd been waiting for. He opened it. Started reading. And I watched his expression change. Not confusion. Not denial. Recognition. This is, he started. A cease and desist, I said, and a liability reassignment. He looked up at me. What? The catering contract you signed in my name, I continued. It's been legally transferred back to you. That's not possible. It is when the actual account holder corrects the authorization. My mother stepped closer. What does that mean? She asked. It means I said that the $120,000 you tried to put under my name is now yours again. Silence. Heavy. Immediate. And the cease and desist, my father asked, his voice tighter now. You're no longer authorized to use my name, my work, or anything connected to my business, I said, in any capacity. He stared at the paper, like if he read it enough times it would change. It didn't. You're doing this now, my mother said, her voice starting to shake. After everything that's happened. No, I replied, because of everything that's happened. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. Good. That made two of us. Clara, she said softer now, almost pleading, we're your parents. I held her gaze. And I was your daughter. That landed. Finally, my father folded the paper slowly, carefully, like that would give him control over something. It didn't. You're walking away from all of this, he asked. I glanced around the room, half empty now. Staff starting to clear things quietly. Guests near the exit already gone in everything but location. Stella still at the table crying into something that used to matter. There's nothing here to stay for, I said. I picked up my purse, adjusted the strap. Familiar movement, different meaning. I looked at them one last time. Not with anger, not with anything they could argue against. Just clarity. I was never the family shame, I said. Neither of them spoke. I was just the only one paying for the illusion. No reaction, no defense, because there wasn't one. I turned and walked away, not rushed, not hesitant, just done. The doors to the ballroom opened easily. The hallway outside felt quieter, cleaner. By the time I reached the main entrance, the night air hit different. Cool, still, real. I stepped outside, took a breath, and kept moving. No one followed. No one called my name, because for the first time there was nothing left for them to say. I reached my car, unlocked it, and got in, closed the door, and just sat there for a second, not thinking, not replaying anything, just sitting. The silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't empty. It was clear. I started the engine, pulled out of the lot, and didn't look back, because there was nothing behind me anymore, only something ahead. And for the first time, it actually belonged to me.